Welcome back. Before we begin our scary tale, thank you for visiting us, and we hope you will consider liking our videos and subscribing as we add new content weekly. And remember, your comments are invaluable to us, so please share your thoughts. No matter how disturbing or scary, it can't be any worse than me going outside without sunscreen.
You seem worried.
I can tell you this. I have been practicing medicine for 30 years, and this is the first time I have ever been truly scared. If we don't figure out how to fight this, we're in trouble.
It started with a faint tickling sensation in Ben's ear. At first, he thought it was nothing, just a stray hair brushing against the inside of his ear canal. He swatted at it absent-mindedly, half asleep in his bed. But the sensation persisted, and after a few minutes it felt like something was crawling inside. Fully awake now, Ben shot up in bed, jamming his pinky into his ear. It's nothing, he told himself. Maybe an itch. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had wormed its way deep into his ear while he was sleeping. The next morning, the sensation was gone, and Ben pushed it from his mind. But later that day, a dull headache bloomed behind his eyes. At first, it was mild, a throbbing ache that grew stronger with every hour. By the afternoon, the pain felt as though a vice was tightening around his skull. And then the sounds began. At first, it was just an undercurrent of a high-pitched whine, like a distant scream overheard through a wall. Ben tried to ignore it, telling himself it was the noise of the city. But as the evening crept in, the screaming whine became louder. Ben rubbed his temples, his vision blurring as he stumbled to the bathroom mirror. His eyes were bloodshot, and dark circles framed his face. He splashed cold water on his face, hoping the shock would clear his mind. But then the crawling sensation returned, and this time it wasn't faint. It was violent, a sharp wriggling deep in his ear, accompanied by a sharp spike of pain that shot through his skull. Panicking, Ben staggered to the phone and dialed the local emergency room. The on-call nurse must have heard the terror in his voice, because she told him to come to the emergency room immediately. By the time he arrived at the clinic, the pain was excruciating. Every step sent waves of agony through his head. His vision flickered, blurring and shifting like a bad signal on a TV. Dr. Stephen Collins, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, led him into the examination room. After listening to Ben's symptoms, he grabbed an otoscope and peered into his ear. A moment later, the doctor recoiled, his face paling. "Something is in there," the doctor whispered to himself. "What? What did you see?" Ben demanded, his voice cracking with fear. The doctor quickly composed himself and called for an immediate MRI scan. Within an hour, Ben found himself lying on a cold table, the machine humming around him as it scanned his brain. The technician's face was grim when he emerged from the room. "He has something alive in there," the technician said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's moving its way towards his brain. It looks like it has partially eaten into his temporal lobe. I have never seen anything like it." Dr. Collins examined the scan. He bit his lip in hesitation. "How do you explain this to the patient?" The words hit Ben like a punch to the gut. He sat there, numb, unable to comprehend the horror of it. An insect, alive and moving, was inside his head. Surgery was scheduled for the next morning.
From the moment I made that first incision, I knew something was wrong. As the scalpel cut through the thin layers of skin over Ben's skull, there was this unnatural tension in the air, as if the room itself was holding its breath. I expected to find some small, singular insect embedded in the tissue near his brain. After all, that's what the scans had suggested. But nothing could have prepared me for the horror that lay beneath. When I peeled back the skin, I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. At first, it looked like a blackened, pulsing mass clinging to the inside of his skull. But then it moved. Hundreds, no, thousands, of tiny, writhing larvae. They were everywhere, squirming in the exposed cavity where Ben's brain should have been. I realized with a cold, sinking horror that the insect hadn't just burrowed inside. It had laid its eggs, and they had hatched, an entire swarm spreading through his skull like a relentless, living plague. The larvae writhed with a grotesque, almost frantic hunger. They had already devoured large sections of his brain, leaving behind nothing but hollowed, rotting tissue. They were feeding on him, feasting on his brain matter as if it were a banquet. And the worst part? The infestation was alive, aware. The moment we exposed them to the light, they seemed to accelerate, their movement becoming frantic, as though they knew they had been discovered. I felt my hands trembling uncontrollably. I stepped back, trying to regain composure, but my mind raced with the terrifying reality of what was happening. The nurses around me gasped, one of them turned away, her face pale with disgust and fear. I heard myself whisper, "I can't stop this." My voice cracked, barely audible. There were simply too many. The mass of wriggling larvae moved as one, spreading through what was left of Ben's brain. Every time I tried to focus, I could see them, eating away what was once his mind, his memories, his very consciousness. They weren't just feeding, they were devouring him, consuming him from the inside out. And as they burrowed deeper, they became faster, more aggressive. It was as if the insects had gained some horrifying momentum. Maybe they were destroying everything that made Ben human. I don't know. His thoughts, his personality, everything, gone, eaten alive by this insatiable infestation. He never woke up. I couldn't save him. His brain, his very essence, had been hollowed out, feasted upon by these tiny maggots. I had opened him up, and in doing so, unleashed a nightmare. I wasn't saving him. I was witnessing his consumption by a force far more terrifying than I could have ever imagined.
It's called Musca cerebrum. It's a mutation of the common fruit fly, and it's a horror that very few people even know exist. It might start with a mild itch deep in the ear, something that could be ignored for a day or two. But soon the itching turns into a maddening pressure, as if something is crawling inside. By the time people realize what is happening, it's too late. The flies, smaller than a grain of sand, slip inside the ear canal, undetectable, their wings beating gently against the delicate skin. There they lay their eggs. The CDC knows. The World Health Organization knows. Reports have trickled in of sudden madness, people clawing at their heads, screaming about whispers and buzzing that no one else could hear. They tear at their flesh, trying to free their minds from the growing insanity. Scans all reveal the same horror. These larvae are eating away at the host's brains. Once the larvae have begun to enter into the skull, there is no way to stop the infestation into the brain. It spreads fast. An infected human host can spread the eggs through the air, in the warmth of a breath or a stray cough. Or the flies will find their next victim, always entering through the ears, always too small to be noticed. The CDC has considered releasing a warning. Just a simple one: wear earplugs. But they've hesitated. At first it was fear of panic, of society collapsing as the truth spreads faster than the flies themselves. But now something darker has emerged. Whispers within the government have hinted that the mutations aren't natural. Someone or something was behind it. A hidden agenda, an experiment gone wrong, or worse, an experiment going exactly as planned. People continued to die, their minds consumed by madness, their bodies twitching as the larvae devour them from the inside out. Families are begging for answers. Medical facilities have stopped admitting patients with any symptoms that resemble this pandemic sickness.
Our medical personnel are terrified of contracting this thing. Both doctors and nurses have informed the hospital administration that they feel we are inadequately prepared to combat this outbreak of whatever this is, let alone help patients. We are trying to get answers, but as of yet there just aren't any. And neither the CDC or the government is offering any explanations. It's very concerning. Every day we are turning away more and more people. Why are we not getting any help? Or any sort of answers?
In the shadows, they are weighing the cost. If people know, chaos will follow. Economies will crumble. Medical facilities will be overwhelmed. Can society even survive such a truth? The answer is no. So they have stayed silent. I would ask you to not stay silent, to spread the word, to save yourselves. Let those lurking in the shadows realize that your mind is of greater worth than theirs. Making this shit is hard. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate it.